And crowd shouted, "Englishmen go home, we want the B specials." They felt betrayed by the Westminster government. The next few months were relatively quiet, but as the army patrolled the winter streets, resentment began to grow in the Catholic ghettos across the city. A series of armed searches began this process of disaffection with the army. The IRA, dormant since 1962, was reorganizing. A split in the movement led to the emergence of the Provisional IRA, committed to the use of force.
You will be obliged to use more gas.
A Protestant march had provoked a riot in the Catholic estate of Ballymurphy. This time it was the British Army who held the Catholics at bay. Catholics now began to see the army as shoring up the system that oppressed them. The Provisionals' bombs were directed at commercial targets in the centres of Belfast and Derry. By forcing the army to protect the city centres, they hoped to deflect them from the Catholic ghettos where the provisional organisation was developing. Protestants were incensed by the campaign, since their businesses were its main target. By the end of June, there had been 54 bomb explosions, not all of them the responsibility of the Provisionals. No one had been killed. June 1970. Despite army advice, Chichester Clerk again allowed the round of summer marches. This one, commemorating the Protestant sacrifice for Britain at the Battle of the Somme, passed by Catholic areas. Rioting was inevitable. Disorder spread across the city. After this film was taken, in the tiny Catholic enclave of Short Strand, surrounded by Protestant East Belfast, the Provisional IRA used guns for the first time to defend one of its districts. In the middle of these disturbances, the worst for a year, Reginald Maudling, Home Secretary, arrived in Belfast.
First of all, I think there is an impression in some quarters that the change of government in Westminster would mean a change of policy towards Northern Ireland. This, I may assure you, is not so. There is no change of policy towards Northern Ireland. It's our intention to support the Northern Ireland government in the programme which they have set in hand.
In fact, the Conservatives, who'd just been elected to office, embarked on a policy of coercion. Powers were taken that made a 6-month sentence mandatory for rioting, and the army was ordered to get tougher. Maudling clearly found the situation confusing and difficult. After all, as Home Secretary, he had other things on his mind. Armed searches were alienating the Catholic community. In the lower falls, a search which produced 100 guns involved extensive damage to Catholic property. A curfew had to be imposed to stop subsequent rioting. Bread and milk had not been freely allowed into the area during the curfew.
Said on all the TV reports, BBC and ITV, that food and milk got into this area. If it got in, the people were not allowed out onto the street until 5 o'clock. So what good was food and bread? And I stood and I personally watched while a milk truck was turned away. And I stood with, I must have been about 50 mothers, wives, crying, begging to get in to see their family, and a truckload of Scottish troops come out past us, and one beside the driver made the finger sign at us while we were standing there. Our children had no food, trying to get in to see what had happened to our families.
Have you noticed?
It hasn't happened according to the papers tonight. It's all a big dream. All we hear is about the impartiality of the Great British Army.